Hi, MC. Thank you for making the time to join us today on the podcast.
Hi, Michael.
I've heard your name and practice paradox come up quite a lot over the many years that I've been in recruitment in the accounting industry. So I think I've even been to one of your talks in Sydney. That's what we realized today.
Right.
Let's start with your business name. It's a very unique name. What's behind the paradox in practice paradox?
Yeah, we get asked that a lot, understandably, because to a lot of people, they think, isn't a paradox a problem or unsolvable riddle? And a paradox essentially means something that seems self-contradictory on the surface, but the longer you think about it, the truer it becomes. So to put that even more succinctly, it's a hidden truth or hidden wisdom. And to me, in my experience, having been round the block a few times at my age now, many of life's wisdoms do lie behind paradoxes. So the answers are often simple, but are not always obvious.
Okay. What are some of your favorite paradoxes in life?
Wow, there are so many. Like in relationships, the old thing about if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's yours. So that's to do with the Zen concept of attachment. Often if people are too attached to an outcome, they actually lose their ability to achieve that outcome. Other ones are things like the happiness and the productivity paradox, where the most unhappy people in the world chase happiness. Happiness is a side effect. It happens when you're doing something worthwhile and meaningful. It's a bit like Buckminster Fuller, who's a wonderful author and thinker in the early 20th century, would talk about processionary effects, so side effects. And, for example, the whole concept of pollination, the health of the flower's own propagation isn't the bee going for the pollen, the bee is going for the nectar, and the system is such that the pollen gets spread from one flower to the next as a side effect of what the bee is doing. So, there's plenty of paradoxes in life, and all of them fascinate me, which is why I named our business Practice Paradox.
Do you know my association with paradox is always like when I see your name or I hear the word, it's indelibly printed in my head. Many years ago, I think in 2007, I went to a gift shop. There's and I got all the spiritual kind of writings, especially by Dalai Lama, and one of them was The Paradox of Our Age. I'm sure you've come across it probably as well.
Okay.
And you can usually see it in scrolls and shops and stuff like that. And do you know the one I'm talking about by Dalai Lama? Well, it's normally attributed to him anyway.
Okay. No, I don't.
It goes something along the lines of we have bigger houses but smaller families, more
Mm-hmm.
conveniences but less time.
Mm-hmm.
We have more degrees but less sense, more knowledge but less judgment, and it goes on and on and on. And that's and it's called the paradox of our age, and that's kind of my association with that word now.
Right, okay. Yeah, I have had people say to me, oh, look, you shouldn't call yourself paradox because it's a negative. To me, it's absolutely not. It's where the breakthroughs
No.
come is by realizing the paradoxes. And the productivity paradox within businesses is, if I do things to make my staff happy, they'll be productive. Where many, many studies have found that it's the productive workers who end up being happy with what they're doing. So you need to be aware of...
Drive them harder?
Not drive them harder, just give them good work and a scoreboard that they can control. Lencioni's book, Three Rules of a Miserable Job? You got to give people a scoreboard and measurability of things that they can affect, not measure them on things that are subjective whims of management. People love being measured and love a scoreboard when it's a player's scoreboard. To borrow a phrase from another book that I love called The Four Disciplines of Execution. But we go off on a tangent there. In terms of accounting firms, why I thought when starting Practice Paradox, which does digital marketing specifically for accounting firms, there's a number of paradoxes that are limiting the potential that the accounting profession has as a whole to deliver value to the world, to society, and in particular to the small business community. And one of the paradoxes is that it's not the best calculators that win, it's the best communicators that win, meaning there's an overemphasis on technical skills and a massive underemphasis on so-called soft skills. And if ever there was a poor phrase invented, it's that one, soft skills, because often they're the most difficult, the hardest skills to develop. So that paradox is that as an advisory profession, the accounting profession really revolves more around people than it does around numbers. And, that's what people would think, what are you talking about? Clearly, accounting is about numbers. And of course, accounting revolves around numbers as a core competence, but it's certainly not a differentiator. The clients or potential clients of an accounting firm can't judge how technically proficient their accountant is, but they can certainly judge the experience they receive when they talk to their accountant or any of their team members over the phone or in meetings. So at the end of the day, communication actually trumps calculation in the accounting profession, but it's only the progressive 5% or so that really are quick to embrace that.
How do you find the ones that have embraced it? What are the quick differentiators when you walk as a client? What would you experience as a differentiator between those 5% and the remaining 95?
Well, I've been a director in accounting firms. I've founded software businesses such as Business Fitness. I was a co-founder there. They're the providers of the How Now software and the Good, Bad, Ugly benchmarking report for accounting firms. And I've spent a lot of time in accounting firms. And here's a classic sign in an accounting firm. Let's say a client drops in to an accounting firm. There's no appointment. They've dropped in. To a typical accountant, that's an interruption. To an accountant who's a great communicator, who loves dealing with people, that's a wonderful opportunity. And I've heard it. I can still recall the conversation between two fairly senior accountants in quite a progressive firm. It was a cubicle nation. It was this open plan office there, and they're standing having a chat. And one of them said to the other, "How's your day shaping up?" The other one goes, "Oh, yeah, it's okay. I lost a lot of time yesterday." "Oh, what happened?" "Oh, a couple of client drop-ins." And the other one goes, "Oh, yeah, don't you hate it? They're the worst." And they were laughing. And, that's it, right? Those sorts of people shouldn't even be given the opportunity to have client meetings if they view people as interruptions. Those people prefer to look at a spreadsheet or a list of tasks in a workflow app than a human sitting across from them in a meeting.
I remember, it hasn't come out yet, but one of the podcasts I did most recently was, do you know Nick Sinclair from TOA?
I do. Yeah.
He mentioned that as one of the things in our conversation before the podcast. When he walks into a really good accounting firm that understands customers, service, and client-centric kind of experience, you walk in, the receptionist is smiling, she knows your name, you get a coffee. It's a very different kind of experience to walking into a regular one where there might not be anyone there. They don't remember your name. They don't really, they just put you in a room and you just wait there. There's no interaction, there's no engagement. And that kind of reminded me of firms that like seeing clients and firms that look at it as more of an interruption. So yeah, no, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
are there any other telltale signs?
Well, they're grinder heavy in terms of the model that most people are familiar with if they've been in the accounting profession. David Maister, who most people will know, popularised that term and is the author of, the trusted professional and managing the professional services firm, etc. over the years. Grinders, minders and finders, where the grinders are good at churning out the work and the minders are good at looking after the clients and the finders are happy to get out of the building and actually go and find clients. But accounting profession, and most firms tend to lean towards grinders, processes when they're recruiting. And you could imagine a scenario in a high school, let's say, where someone is meeting with a career guidance counsellor, and imagine the conversation going along these lines. "Okay, you're very good with logic and order and attention detail and numbers. Oh, gee, I know what you should be." Rather than, "You know what? When I'm with you, I really feel like you're present. You're always interested in me. You're asking questions about me. And I always leave the conversation feeling energized and that you actually took an interest in me. You know what? The perfect career for you would be accountant." Right? It doesn't happen. So
would never happen.
The whole system currently, and this is endemic, and it really is a systemic issue in the accounting profession, is that the accounting profession's ability to communicate value is the biggest skill gap in the profession. Yet they continue to hire people who see humans as interruptions rather than as connections. So you're never going to succeed. I don't care what conferences you send your staff to, what software you subscribe to that can do dashboards and reports. If your firm is full of grinders, you are not going to deliver a good client experience. Now, if you're listening to this right now and thinking, yeah, but I deliver a great client experience, perhaps as a principal or a partner in the firm, well, that's fantastic. How are you going to actually replicate that and have a modular system of teams where each team does give a good client experience? Because of what I do, Michael, often people share their experiences with me of their accountants or even prospective accountants that they've met with. And certain things stick in my mind. I remember one guy said to me, when I sit across from my accountant, I just know he doesn't give a shit about me as a person, right? Now that sounds extreme, but what was happening is that accountant was meeting with this client for a year-end sort of process, and they had their checklist, and they're going through and asking all these questions, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, to work out all the different deductions. And, you know, it felt like they were on an assembly line and a production rather than, okay, so let's talk about where you're headed, how's this year panned out, let's look at some things you can do differently to have a better result. So I'm fascinated and passionate about, I hate the word passionate, but I really love the accounting profession because there is so much opportunity right there, right in front of every accountant, every time they talk to a client, email a client, where there's opportunities to help them if they know how. But to come back to the paradox idea, right? If the ability to communicate value is the number one thing holding back most accounting firms, and I'm happy to circle back to why that is. The ability to communicate value, one to many, is, and I'm sorry, language warning for everyone. I'm about to use some words that accountants hate to hear, that they find quite offensive. The ability to communicate value, one to many, is marketing. Marketing is the communication of value. In its essence, it's education. That's what I teach our clients, that it's about educating your clients. And the ability to communicate value one-to-one or one to maybe two or three people is selling. And accountants run a mile from marketing and sales. They have very negative attitudes towards even learning anything about marketing and selling. And that's a paradox, right? They're running away from the antidote to their ills. And if you look at the studies, and I mentioned it briefly, the full name of it is The Good, the Bad and the Ugly of the Accounting Profession, of the Australian accounting profession. Each year, Business Fitness surveys around about 300 firms, plus or minus 50 or so. Very in-depth survey, if anyone listening right now has ever done it. And then they report on the findings. You know, what are the high-performing firms doing? What are the average firms doing, etc.? And that question, I've seen this data in other reports too by people like Spotlight Reporting, who are a global company but out of New Zealand, good friends of ours. And, you know, 9 out of 10 firms surveyed, 9 out of 10, when asked the question, would you like to do more? And here comes another term that accountants are probably sick of hearing, but would you like to do more value-add advisory, future-focused services? 9 out of 10 say yes. But when you look at the revenue mix, what percentage of revenue is coming from the different areas of the business? When I first looked at this, it was about 1 in 10 firms were actually achieving a significant portion of their revenue, being greater than 20%, through non-compliance areas. Now, very quick, before Paul Meisner calls up, and I love Paul. Paul Meisner, who used to run the great podcast with David Boyar called From the Trenches.
Yep.
He's of a very strong view that there is a great business to be had for an accounting firm just doing compliance. And there is. So compliance is wonderful. It's a beautiful business in and of itself. But for those who want to actually help clients more and steer them in their life and towards something that's important for them in their life, the advisory needs to be marketed and needs to be sold because by its very definition, it's non-compliance, right? So the government of the world is not, the governments of the world are not making small businesses have to plan. You know, I would love it in any country, but let's talk about Australia. We deal with clients in about 8 different countries. But if there was a budget handed down where there was a tax incentive, or inversely, a penalty for not doing this, where rather than just report on the last 90 days with the business activity statements, they had to do a projected cash flow forecast prepared by a professional based on historical patterns. The technology is all here for all in place to do that very efficiently these days, of course. But, to be lodging projections and plans, working capital and cash flow projections. But at the moment, because small businesses don't have to do that, they're not penalised for not doing it, they don't do it unless they're with an accounting firm, a business advisory firm who really, I'm going to swear again, you can beep me out later, but who really gives a shit about helping their small business.
As much as you want.
They really, really care about helping their small business clients have a better life. And another story has just popped into my head. In my business fitness days, being one of the 4 co-founders there, part of what we would do would be conferences around Australia, not just in capital cities, but, around the coastline of Australia in particular. And I remember, I think I was in Rockhampton at one of these business fitness classes that we were running. And I was sitting next to a gentleman who would have easily been in his mid-60s, maybe a little bit older. And when I was at these events, I would just love asking questions and listening to the stories. And I said to him, what's been the most rewarding thing for you in your career, over the last 40 plus years as an accountant? And to me, this really summed up the difference that a future-focused accountant can make. And he said, you know what? Just last weekend, I was invited to attend the wedding of a client's daughter. And you might think, oh, what's the big deal about that? He said, well, my wife and I were invited. We went along and we looked at the seating arrangement, and we were seated at the parents' table. It was a big wedding, and we were at the parents' table, so in the inner circle of people in their life. And we were really chuffed about that. And when I thought about it, we've taken this family from when they were young, when they went into business for themselves, saw them through the period where they had kids, growing kids, and then everything that comes with that, having to educate them, care for them, house them, etc. And, we really have been an integral part of them having a really good life. And here's their daughter getting married, and we are at the table with the parents. And to me, that was just confirmation. This is what the gentleman said, that, what we do really matters. And to me, that's perfect. That really sums up what a future-focused accountant can do in the lives of their clients.
And that's the element of being that trusted advisor, basically.
It is, yeah.
They aim to be, theoretically. And
most claim to be.
yeah. Circling back, once again, it just reminded me of something. One of the previous guests in the podcast was John Knight from the Business Depot.
Oh, yes.
Don't know if you've come across him.
Oh, yeah. I've watched John's journey closely from Business Depot and prior. Yeah, very switched on operator.
Very switched on. But I think what made me think of him straight away as you were speaking was your focus on the human, and also your discussion about the grinders versus the minders, etc. When I speak to John, his whole essence is about the human. Like, for him, accounting has always been a tool to help businesses and clients, but his central focus has been the connection with the human, whether it's the staff or his focus on his clients and their journeys and how you can add value to them. And he's a big proponent of marketing that would allow him to spread that connection from one to many, as you said before. And that's probably why his firm has grown so quickly and so much.
Yeah, he's done a lot of things really well.
Yeah. Have you actually had much to do with him?
No, I haven't. No. But when I was watching Business Depot launch and evolve, everything they were doing was just 100% aligned in terms of their attention to, here's a kind of a minor point, but it's not a minor point, is the fact that he cares about design. If you look at all of their branding and their website, everything was always on brand. Even the photography of the team members in there always had a particular filter and look and feel. So you could tell that the founder of that business really cared about design. And I won't go on about design, but it is a very common trait in the superstar clients that we've had over our 12 years. They have all cared about design. Years ago, so I'm showing my age now, In the early 1990s, I was running a consulting division for a company called the Results Corporation. So the Results Corporation, for those listening, predated Results Accountant Systems, which predated Results Accountants Network, but there's like a family tree you could draw out of related businesses. But one of my clients was a retailer in the financial precinct in Brisbane. His name was George, and he had a big poster up on the wall. So he's selling nice suits, right? Suits, ties, shoes, all that sort of stuff. And it's a saying that I saw many times later after, but the first time I saw it, this poster on the wall, and it said, good grooming never got a person into the boardroom, but bad grooming kept plenty out. Now, that's coming from a retailer wanting to sell you a nice suit, right? But from a design perspective, the average accountant's brand looks like a cheap, crumpled suit. The average website, their branding looks like, their high school son or daughter or the work experience kid or the intern or someone did it. Just horrific. A true story on that. Like, people think I'm joking when I give examples like that. So a firm recently, we take a very structured approach when we work with firms. Like, if someone came to us and said, we want help with blogging, can you do that? We wouldn't just start with that, because that's a waste of time to start there. If, for example, the website isn't going to effectively keep people there when they go there. And anyway, this firm had a horrific logo, terrible colours. It looked like a piece of clip art. And I said to this gentleman, his name was Michael, so Michael, can I ask, so this is before he's a client, who designed your logo? And I should have been doing air quotes as I said the word design. And he went, our design lady did it. His words, not mine. And I said, okay. And then he moved on to something else. And I circled back again. I said, so who was it that did your logo? Our design lady. I said, so does she do this for a living? And he said, well, yeah, she does our design stuff. I said, so she has a business designing logos. Well, kind of, was his response. I said, well, what does kind of mean? Well, she's the wife of our IT guy. Right. Okay. And we kept going. I said, look, really, and I used the example, you currently look like a cheap, crumpled suit. And that is the seed. Your colours, your logo, that's the seed of your visual branding. We can't make your website and blog posts and email newsletters and social posts look good if the seed in the corner looks amateur and rubbish, and that's going to have to change. And he didn't like hearing that. But part of what we do is to dish out tough love, just like good parents. You don't tell your kids what they want to hear, you tell them what they need to hear, and sometimes it's tough love.
So the takeaway from that is you can't just launch into marketing and start doing content without the right foundation, such as, the right image, the right message, the right logo, etc.
Correct. But even upstream from that is strategy. One of the models that we use, Michael, when we explain marketing, because marketing can seem like a black box of mystery to many. And there's a lot of operators in marketing that may have done a weekend course in something, and all of a sudden they're some expert in LinkedIn or social media or something like that.
There's plenty of those at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of not so good operators in the space. So, it does pay to be cautious. So we explain with marketing, we use the analogy of a marketing machine that has gears, first, second, third gear, etc. And first gear, where, when you're learning to drive, I don't know if you can recall learning to drive a manual car, but when you're at an intersection or something and you go to start and you're accidentally in third gear, it doesn't go so well. Same with third gear in marketing is publishing content. If you start there, it won't go so well. So first gear is strategy. And even quite sophisticated firms, when they come to us, often are missing one or two pieces of their strategy, even though they may have been active with blog posts and videos and webinars. And when they get those pieces in place in their strategy, then everything changes for them in terms of the effectiveness of that marketing content. Then after strategy, the second gear is your presence. So the presence is the first impressions that your business makes when someone first discovers it online. So that includes what the website looks like, the initial wording that people read. It's called the value proposition on the homepage. Even people's social media accounts, whether they're branded consistently and professionally as their website. Then the third gear is content, because then your website is actually worthy and ready of more traffic or visitors. Quick analogy on that one is your website's like a bucket, and the people visiting your website is like water going into the bucket, and most people are pouring water into leaky buckets. which is a website that doesn't actually have people stay and read and click and download and end up on the email newsletter list, etc. So yeah, you can tell when people are a bit disappointed initially when they say, yeah, we want to get into social media and we want to get into blogging. We go, yeah, great. Let's look at the process to get you there, because they're champing at the bit to get into content publishing, but we save them from themselves.
Okay. Circling back a little bit, the different type of people at accounting firms, high-end, it comes back to what you call the value-add chasm that your firm also helps to bridge. The type of people that they do need to hire, how would they go about attracting them? What exactly are those types of people that can help them bridge that chasm as well?
That is a great question, Michael, in terms of attracting the people into the profession. And there are a few different ways that I'm seeing progressive firms do this, and there's no right or wrong or exclusive way of doing this. But one way is to acknowledge that the system at the moment of people going from school into an accounting degree and then coming out is generally producing grinders. Whereas what we're seeing a lot of progressive firms is get them before the system gets to them, and basically place kids straight out of high school into traineeships,
cadetships and stuff.
Cadetships, yeah. One of our clients in Brisbane,
and a lot of partners were made that way. Like if I look at most young partners that made it to the top very quickly, they started as cadets.
Yeah, absolutely, because they get on the ground very quickly. And in my experience, in most degrees, I've got a few degrees. I've actually got an industrial design background, an innovation technology background as well. Part-time students tend to produce the best graduates because they're in the real world while they're learning the theory, not getting 3 or 4 or 5 years of theory and then being put out in the real world. So, cadetships, internships is a very, very good way of going about it. One of our first clients is a business called Growthwise. I don't know if you know Steph Hines.
In Newcastle, right?
In Newcastle, yeah. She was our first client to go through what was then called our Modern Marketing Academy program. And got a few stories about Steph. She's quite a character. But I remember her sharing at one of our master classes how, if I recall correctly, this team member's name is Daniel, and he started out of high school and then went into accounting, studied accounting, kept working in the firm. And in his late teens, before it even hit 20, he already had a number of years' experience under his belt working in the firm and was an important cog in their business advisory service in terms of delivering it. They were at the time, and they probably still are, using Spotlight reporting. And the thing is, with reports and dashboards, they need interpretation. You can't just put a dashboard or a report, no matter how colourful and pretty it is, in front of a client. The clients, they're busy. They're struggling in the operational whirlwind, as they call it, in the 4 disciplines of execution. So they need someone to say, here's what this means and here's what you've got to do. And Daniel, as I think at the time a 19-year-old, was involved in that interpretation and commentary on the monthly reports going out to their clients. So that's amazing, right? Most 19-year-olds would not be involved in such an important delivery piece. There was a QA.
No, they'd be doing back office, BASs and trial balances.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, get the kids in young, right? And teach them your culture. The other thing is, and I'm going to be brutally honest here, the best talent isn't necessarily sitting out there going, what I really want to do is go work for a small accounting firm. They're not. They're not sitting around, most of them, until they come across something that really ignites them. They see something and think, that is cool, or sick, or dope, or whatever words the kids use these days. I've got a couple of teenagers. It's hard to keep up with the latest adjectives. But they see something that they really, really like. And they think, wow, that is really freaking cool. And you're not going to get that if your digital presence is a crumpled, boring, navy pinstripe suit. But you're going to get it. I think last time I looked at Growthwise's website, their headline at the top of the homepage was Think, Learn, Grow and Kick Ass. So it's a bit different. It's a bit out there. But someone who's that relates to, they're going to think, here's something different. Here's something different. So it really does help to have a very strong digital presence that is a bit cut through, not just doing the usual Most content that accounting firms do, I don't know why they even bother. And most providers of content to accounting firms, I don't know why they bother. I kind of like them out there because they provide good contrast. But just for us, but just telling people when the next deadlines are and for lodgements and payments, sure, that stuff's important, but it's not life-changing. It's not exciting to them. They figure you're going to tell them anyway and make sure that they stay compliant. But Steph shared in one of our member webinars once how she'd picked up a brand new client. And this story illustrates the power of a marketing approach that is educational in nature rather than promotional. And she just picked up this new client. It was the end of the initial engagement meeting where they'd signed on the bottom line. The client had signed up to the full suite of services. So yes, the compliance piece, but the monthly reporting and the coaching and the technology support, etc. And Steph then realized she'd forgotten to ask this new client where they first discovered GrowthWise. And the client's answer was, well, I've been following you for a while now because I read an article of yours that was about why the number one asset for a small business is data. And that jumped out at me because I thought, what's an accountant talking about data for and assets? That seemed a bit weird, but I read it and you opened my eyes to the power of, cloud computing, cloud accounting, and this whole idea of joining apps together into a tech stack. And that really shifted my thinking, and I've been following you ever since. And Steph went, oh, that's an old article. When did you read that? And the client had to think back and went, I think it was about 9 months ago, right? So that's the power of great content, is you are shifting people's thinkings, you're shifting their belief, and they will be drawn towards your leadership when you're showing them a better way. Because 99% of accounting firms out there are just telling everyone about the next payment and lodgement deadlines or an interpretation of the last budget. And that stuff is important, but it's not life-changing.
The thing partners will always say is, and you've come onto a great point, content is hugely valuable. And John said that. Like, I asked him what he finds as the most effective marketing tool. He said content. And then my next question was, well, like, everyone's being told to produce content and everyone is basically spamming content these days. How do you stand out? And he had an answer for that. But how is a small, and just for the listeners as well, like most of your clients are 1 to 2 partner firms, small, entrepreneurial, kind of nimble. Mm-hmm. Probably, what would you say? What's their size in terms of fee and staff size?
In terms of the firms that we typically work with?
Yeah.
As you said, Michael, they're typically 1 to 2 partner firms. Though we've worked with large firms, we've worked with offices of the Big Four, we've worked with listed companies as well. Yeah. But the typical is 1 or 2 partner firms, and they usually have somewhere between 7 to 15 staff or thereabouts. So, and one of the things that we focus on is helping them increase their average client fee, like on an annual basis, not just by putting their prices up, right? But by actually scoping and selling more services on top of that compliance piece. And it's not uncommon for a firm that might say have a current average annual client fee for a small business client of, say, in Australian dollars, say 4,000, to get that up around 12,000 when you learn how to package in the advisory. So that's about baking in advisory is like standard and normal, not some optional cross-sell, upsell. I hate those words. It's not something optional, but it's just a core part of the offering.
Okay. Well, what I was going to ask you is like a typical firm of that size, when the partner is very hands-on, and especially if it's a sole practitioner where everything is on their plate, staff recruitment, management, client retention / new clients, etc., and also the execution of the grinding work. Finding the time to focus on marketing, because that's really what I'm getting out of this and what I've gotten out of other conversations. It's a thing that you can't do ad hocly. Mm-hmm. It has to be a focus. It has to be strategic. How do they find the time to write the articles, have a strategy around? Is that do you find most of them just outsource it to someone? Do they sit down and do it themselves? Like, what's the common thing and what's the right approach?
Wow, there's multiple levels to that. It's a great question. The first thing that you can't do is abdicate. And by abdicate, I mean it's a very different thing to delegate. So abdicate is where you think you can sign a check, so to speak, dust your hands off and say, you handle that. Now, if you do that, you'll get a very ordinary outcome. So what you need to do is to collaborate with someone who helps in your content workflow. So let's use workflow as an example because accounting firms relate to that, right?
Yep.
And in a firm, let's say, a firm might have 7 people in it. A job might go through 3 different people to get it out the door, right? Maybe 4. So doing different levels of work. Same with the content. So the key is, if you're not a good writer yourself, and when I say good, that also means quick to get to a finished piece. And most people are not those things, right? Writing is hard when you do it well. And with digital content, there's also other aspects apart from the article. There's making it rank well in Google, but I'll park that for a moment. What the thought leaders, I hate that term thought leaders, but basically the people with ideas within the business, what they need to do is have the ability to do brain dumps and then hand that off. And a brain dump can be, depending on their own preference, it's a bit like, how some people are visual, some people are kinesthetic, some people are auditory. In our experience, having dealt with many hundreds of firms now around the world over the last 12 years, the most common form that when we're doing blogging for an accounting firm of brain dump is basically through the keyboard, dot points, the rough ideas, bam, words, bam. Mm-hmm. But other brain dumps that people use is sometimes audio, because sometimes people might dictate into their smartphone while they're, walking along, walking the dog or driving the car or whatever. And then we transcribe that and do like a journalistic approach. That's the interview, so to speak. And then we polish it from there. But upstream from all of this is they need to understand why they're bothering to do the content in the first place. So if you want to avoid pedestrian same content that you've only got to log into LinkedIn and have a look at all the very ordinary same content out there. They need to have frameworks to understand what is my goal here. And when you're writing a piece of content, before you even think of a topic, let alone start writing, it's who's my target audience.
Yep.
And so for an accounting firm, one of the things that we help them work out, Michael, is are we targeting anyone with a checkbook and a heartbeat, as the old joke goes, right? A lot of firms take anyone who walks through the door. Or do we have some specific target markets? So we help firms work out their target buyer personas or avatars, which are these imaginary people that are described in depth on 32 different aspects. We help them describe those. And then when you're writing an article, you go, okay, who is this article speaking to? It's not speaking to the general public because that will get ignored. It's not speaking to small businesses in general, because that will get ignored. So it's got to be to a specific target audience. And then what is it about? So part of the target buyer persona, which essentially is just deeply understanding who you want to connect with, is what are these things that keep them awake at night? Their pain points, their aspirations, where are they stuck? Where are the quick wins? And that then gives you the topics to write content about. So at this point, no one's even written a word. This is framework. This is thinking. Okay, so then you're thinking, all right, let's talk about the challenge they have around whatever. Let's say it's managing their cash flow. Then you can work out what are the 3 core principles that if they understood that area. So here we're talking about education. So you imagine when you're producing a piece of content that you're teaching a class. What does my target audience need to understand about managing their cash flow, the rights and the wrongs? And the content essentially just shifts their thinking. Here's a bit of the psychology about why good blogging works. There's a principle in psychology that many people would have heard of called cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance, so crucial. And for those of you listening now who that's a new concept to, it essentially means it's where a person's newfound knowledge, attitudes, and belief are at dissonance or differ against what they were previously seeing, understanding, and believing. And a good article or video or any piece of content will shift people's thinking where they go, oh, hang on, that article just talked about 3 things to not do in managing a business cash flow, and we're doing all 3 of them. Bam. That cognitive dissonance creates a discomfort that they then want to address. And to sell advisory services, you must get your clients feeling that discomfort, that discontent or cognitive dissonance before they'll even want to have a conversation about it. it's a bit like if someone wants to get fit, right? They want to lose weight or improve their body shape or whatever it is. Have the jeans that they owned 5 years ago fit them comfortably. They've got to feel that discomfort to care enough to take action. Comfortable people just stay on the proverbial couch. So you've got to get people out of their comfort zone, and the best way to do it is educate them in a way where you're giving them some tough love, you're grabbing them by the shoulders, you're shaking them and helping them just really realize the gap between where they are now and where they could be. Because that is really what advisory services is. They're footbridges to basically just bridge those gaps between where they are now in whatever aspect of their life and where you're educating them that they could be if they just followed a particular process.
Okay. I like the example you've given of cognitive dissonance and discomfort that is a bridge towards being able to offer them, or for the client to even approach you and talk about it. Because let's face it, as you said before, accountants don't exactly love selling. They kind of expect the client to come and approach them before they offer them a service. So it's a good little bridge, I would say, for sure.
And you know, one thing for anyone who's still thinking, yeah, but I still don't like marketing, I totally acknowledge the cynicism, because particularly in the business to consumer, the B2C space, we've all had bad experiences with bad salespeople, right? Whether it's buying a car or a house or something, right? So people think that it's about being tricked or outwitted or something. But in the business to business space, which is where we operate, it's just basically about being helpful. It's just about helping people go from where they are to where they could be, and to focus on that education. Here's the beautiful thing about it. When you do a really great piece of content that is educational, people will thank you for it. They're not going to thank you for an ad or a brochure, but they'll thank you for shifting their thinking, because that led to them feeling a discomfort that they then did something about. So this style of marketing will work to attract new clients, but your existing clients will also feel a sense of gratitude on that. And this just popped into my head as I said it. Client of ours in Brisbane, they worked with us for a couple of years, then they stopped for a while. She had a lot of stuff going on in her personal life, the changes, and she just sort of took a foot off the marketing accelerator, which was fine. We said, hope to see you back again sometime. And she came back, and I said to her, Susan, her name is, I said, Susan, what brought you back? She said, my clients. They were saying, where are those articles you used to send us? They were really helpful. So people aren't going, where are those ads you were running? I missed them. So, you know, just be helpful.
Okay. Well, look, everyone drums on about the whole, especially I've noticed over the last couple of years, everyone drums on about value add and advisory, and you should move into that, etc. For obvious reasons. One is the dollar factor. As you said, it increases your average fees from $3,000 to $12,000 plus. How do you see advisory? Like what? Because it's such a broad term. What is advisory? What that you're advocating for that accountants should be providing to their clients?
Well, the first thing I would say is there's no one definition of advisory, and that each accounting firm can define their own boundaries around what is advisory and what is not advisory in terms of what they want to deliver. So that's the first thing, because as you say, Michael, it's a very, very broad term. A lot of people talk about compliance plus as a term, the level of advisory that's just beyond what they're doing. My favorite sort of sweet spot with advisory is essentially management accounting. So it's the future focused projections to help the businesses, you know, set targets, work towards those, look at what are the leverage points and KPIs. But if anyone wants to see my full view of advisory and why, frankly, most accounting firms have failed in their desire to deliver more advisory, if they just Google our business name of Practice Paradox and the value pyramid, what we did one day on a flip chart in the office, I was just brainstorming with the team, what are the reasons why accounting firms find it hard to deliver advisory? And one of the reasons is they find it hard to scale beyond the principals or directors being personally involved in delivering those services. And a lot of the advice that different business coaches around the traps that help accounting firms, and you and I know plenty of them, they often give advice that to me is not scalable. If you're adding a service to your range of services in the accounting firm, and it's going to have to be delivered by the most senior people in the firm, well, you've got a problem, haven't you? Because there's already a bottleneck in the firm. And when you look at bottles, the bottleneck's usually at the top of the bottle there somewhere. So you want to design advisory that adds value but can be a workflow team collaboration, if you like, to deliver it. So what we identified were these different layers of value around the different pieces of real-time data at the bottom, then compliance, then clarity, then accountability, etc. And the top two levels of strategy and innovation of adding value, and you'll see it in the blog, I think it's a 3 or 4 part blog post series that I wrote, is that the highest points of value are actually very, very difficult to deliver as a business. It's okay if you're a solo, coach or consultant, you can do those things. But to have a team deliver them, it will take years to get your team members up to speed to where you are. So there is a sweet spot right in the middle of the value pyramid that is around clarity and accountability. People will pay money to be held accountable. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this thing called the personal trainer. Everyone could set their alarm an hour earlier tomorrow and get out of bed and go to the park. But if they commit and pay money to someone to show up, they're more likely to get results. People are happy to be held accountable. And to me, that is the sweet spot of compliance plus advisory, where you can have team members that might have only, say, 3+ years experience, be very meaningfully, ethically and profitably involved in delivering the advisories, but avoid the ones that can only be delivered. We've actually got a little calculator. Actually, I'm happy to provide it as a value add if you like. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so that should get everyone's propellers whirring, where across 6 different factors for each service that your firm either delivers or is thinking about delivering, on each of these 6 factors, you rate them from 1 to 10 in terms of the available labour force to deliver that, or the ability to teach that to someone else, or the ability to automate aspects of it. And then it uses conditional formatting in Excel to colour code it on a scale through, red, orange, yellow, green, and you can see what the most scalable services are. And a huge mistake that an accounting firm can make is to try to do too many advisory services. You'll sometimes see websites for accounting firms and you look at their services page and you think, do you really offer all of that stuff? And I know with my experience that probably a lot of what's listed there, that might be something they do every once in a while, once in a blue moon, or maybe through an occasional referral relationship. But, here's a paradox for you. I call it the focus paradox. You succeed by doing less, not more. Greg McEwen wrote about it in his excellent book called Essentialism. But you succeed by doing less. So it takes discipline for a business to go, yes, I know I could deliver 36 different services. We're capable of doing it. I learnt them at uni. I got distinctions in those subjects. I know how to do these things. But to have the discipline to limit those 36 back to 6 and really, really nail the marketing, the selling, and the delivery of those half a dozen services and do them insanely well, and just develop relationships, trusted referral relationships outside of those, so that you're still looking after your clients when you get those requests outside of that core. But, that scalability piece can't be ignored. It's not the be all and end all. There might be very unscalable services that someone might choose to do for strategic reasons because it's their R&D, their research and development playground, where they learn things and they're pushing boundaries. That's fine if the learnings are then leveraged.